Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leading the Way. My name is Anthony Domathoti, broker owner, Exit Realty Premium. And this morning, we have a special treat. We have Charlie Oppler, NAR President 2021, in the studio with us. Welcome, Charlie. Welcome to Leading the Way.
Thanks, Anthony. It's great to be here with you.
I am thrilled that you are here because you bring a wealth of knowledge, experience, and tremendous candor to where our industry is heading today. I do know there's a lot of discussion right now about the country is divided, people are opinionated, and there is a big issue in our industry boiling right now, which brings to me the need for advocacy, which is probably the most important topic that we need to focus on today. So I'm going to throw the ball to you, Charlie. What do you think about advocacy? Where are we heading with this? What are some things that we need to nail down?
Well, it's nice that you say I'm experienced and a wealth of knowledge. I've been doing this for a long time and certainly seen, the whole spectrum of things that happen. Mm-hmm. But I've been involved in the association, as you know, since 1981 when my career started, and served locally, statewide, and nationally, culminating in 2021. What's never changed is when people associate the National Association of Realtors and NAR, advocacy is the first thing that comes to mind. And it's twofold. It's where do we stand on issues? How do we make a difference both in the grassroots and also on the financial end? The financial end is simple. It's RPAC, right? RPAC is the members being involved in the process by giving and investing in what the future of our industry is. From the grassroots side, we've gotten involved in so many elections over the years where there are potential legislators that have not supported us on real estate issues. And when you think about advocacy, it's not that we're on the Democrat side, the Republican side, the blue or the red. We always kid that we're the purple, the Realtor Party, because we're focused on Realtor issues. When you talk politics, you could go in so many different directions, right? And really create a fight. But when you talk about home ownership, property rights, and where we stand on Realtor issues, that's what's important. And if you go back to the COVID days, our most recent discussion, if you will, and successes was making sure that, for instance, Realtors who were independent contractors had the same benefits as employees. So they had a chance to recover dollars because certainly there was going to be lost income during that period. So whatever the issue is, and as you said, the country is divided 50-50 on almost every issue because it's political. But when it comes to Realtor issues and home ownership, property rights, advocacy is first and foremost with our members. 1.6 million members. You're never going to agree on everything, but we do agree on home ownership and property rights, and we're going to continue to make sure that our voice is heard throughout the country.
Right. Certainly with advocacy, Charlie, there's a pushback, right? Mm-hmm. There are people who will oppose us, who will negate the entire realtor stand on where we... So how do we handle the pushback?
Well, you expect pushback on anything. There's always a popularity, right, into doing what's right. So one size doesn't fit all. What maybe works in Texas may not work in New York or New Jersey,
True.
Right? Just
True.
Different philosophies.
Right.
But when you look at the issue, there's generally consensus in a room as to what benefits consumers and realtors. And we're always going to be consumer-centric. No matter what we do, it's got to be for the seller, the buyer, the renter, the property owner, commercial, right? We look at all facets of the business, and we're going to make sure that those issues get vetted out. Give you an example, the 1031 tax-free exchange.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Most recently, that was a big issue under the previous administration, and we were able to get that continuation through Congress that, homeowners that own commercial property, right? Because most do. 80% of commercial properties are owned by people like you and me, mom and pops, not the big hedge funds and insurance companies. We were able to get that, sustained through the tax code changes. And most recently, Pennsylvania this past year approved it on a state level because all 49 states except Pennsylvania recognized the 1031 tax-free exchange. So even though it was a federal tax loophole, if you will, or certainly strategy,
right.
Pennsylvania didn't. They were just able to get that through their legislature. So an item like that is important to our members, but also important to property owners.
Right. And, I sometimes I'm amazed to say that we are the largest trade association in America, and certainly the most influential in creating vibrant, diverse communities, across the states and across all the nation. Which brings me to the point where I remember during your presidency, you were the first president ever to issue an apology as to what happened with fair housing, etc. And we were amazed to have you as our leader to speak for our industry as to what's happening. Do you want to touch on that a little bit? Because that's monumental.
Sure. I appreciate the kind words. When you're involved in an organization, you look at all the things that have been done before you, and you try to look at the future in anything that you do, just like the way you run your business. You recognize that history has a place because history repeats itself.
Right.
But at the same time, you learn from history because you may not do the same things in the future. Realtors did not support the Fair Housing Act in 1968 under President Lyndon Baines Johnson. In fact, our trade association did not let African Americans join. And to think that that's only 50 plus years ago to me was unbelievable. So I worked with our Vice President of Advocacy, Brian Green, at the National Association of Realtors, and I said, we've got to change the narrative. We can't change what happened 50 years ago, but we as an association can recognize that that wasn't the right thing to do. So I issued an apology that basically said we were part of the problem. We weren't the only issue. There are a lot of issues with racism that still exist. But we did not allow members. So what could we do differently? We could say there are issues out there that we can't correct, but in fact, we can take that step forward and recognize that diversity is a fabric of our country. I look at my own company, and we speak 40 languages.
Wow.
And we're, a New Jersey company right across the river.
Right.
Well, when you look at that and you say, okay, if your company has that much diversity, why doesn't the National Association of Realtors? So Brian and I did an interview. We talked about fair housing and many issues, and I issued an apology that said we were wrong to exclude African American members and not to support the Civil Rights Act. We can't change what happened, but we can put a big focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm proud to say that I think the association's taken tremendous leaps forward. In fact, last year we had, I believe, 60 new trainers being educated on that alone, just to have seminars, throughout the country, and including, up in the Hudson Gateway, we had one that was a combination of New York and New Jersey, and it was sold out in minutes. And it's about learning, and it's about having the respect between people when you have a conversation and not making judgments about what they look like versus, who they are.
Right. I do know that you've made a great impact at a state level, local level, and also the national level. Congratulations on your Aris Media Award that you received recently. It's a tremendous award of recognition for all that you've done and continue to do. And when all of this is happening, there is a big wave of events happening with DOJ. And there's a lot of talk about it. And of course, there's a lot of literature, a lot of material, a lot of websites, a lot of comments. There are a lot of armchair warriors, keyboard warriors out there. And I just wanted to hear your take on that.
Wow. The Department of Justice obviously has...
You took a deep breath before that.
I did. The Department of Justice certainly has the ability to investigate businesses of any kind to make sure that they represent good business ethics, make sure, again, that the consumer is protected, right? We now have the CFPB for oversight, but yet we still had the Department of Justice saying, hey, real estate may not work the way it's supposed to. Now, we're not sure who initiated that and got the ear of the Department of Justice, but certainly, when you get a complaint and they want to look into your business as to the way it works, that's of a concern. Not to mention that you start to say, okay, what did we do wrong? We took it from the standpoint of we're one of the only countries in the world that has an effective MLS. Well, MLSs promote fair housing because everybody gets a right to the same properties. If you list something in Queens or I list something in New Jersey, you put it on the MLS, thousands, tens of thousands of agents that might have a customer can go see that property.
Everybody can see it.
Everybody can see it, and it's now put on all the social media and portals and websites, and everybody in the world knows it. Well, the Department of Justice didn't think that we were doing some things correctly. We went back and forth, began really with the complaint in late 2019. Not a whole lot happened in 2020. And then in 2021, my first week on the job, we get the full complaint, and that was also the same week that I issued the apology for the NAR stance on Fair Housing Act. So we had a pretty busy week. We went back and forth with the Department of Justice. They had a lot of questions on a lot of issues. We narrowed it down to 4 things: a negotiation, but also a discussion. And the Department of Justice said, if you implement these 4 items, we're satisfied, we're happy, and they put that in writing. Where I am from in New Jersey, if you shook somebody's hand, you had a deal. Well, we thought we had a deal. It was signed off by the Department of Justice along with the National Association of Realtors. The 4 items were: we wouldn't advertise our services as free, that we wouldn't categorize listings by the amount of the commission to the selling agent, that we would express that also in the portals and the MLSs to make sure that it was not, you weren't showing property based upon how much money you or I could make. And the 4th was that not everybody's a realtor. There are licensees that don't believe in the Realtor Association. Nobody will tell me that, but I know by numbers it's correct. And the Department of Justice wanted to make sure that anybody that was a licensee would have a right to show a property because somebody who's not a realtor could see it on social media and have a customer. And with the consent of the seller, somebody who's not a realtor or anybody would have access to a property. Those were the 4 issues.
Right.
We agreed. Put in writing, they accepted, we accepted. This was in November or December of 2021. Labor Day weekend. This was in November, December of 2020 when I first took office. In July 4th weekend of 2021, I get a call from our chief legal counsel at the National Association of Realtors, Katie Johnson, and she said, the Department of Justice has reneged on their deal. I said, well, that's a problem. Why don't we just sue them and tell them that they've got to live up to an obligation? And she said, let's talk Monday or Tuesday, but you can tell them we don't have a deal. And she said, do you want to speak to the leadership team? I said, I'll do that, but they're going to know how strongly I feel about somebody reneging on a deal. And I spoke to the team and just basically said, this is my position, and I'd appreciate your support. We ended up suing the Department of Justice. We have a family chat, and my son Michael, who runs our operations, put out there, everybody lock your cars, watch your tires. Dad just sued the government. That's really smart of him.
That is smart.
Maybe not as smart as you think you are sometimes, right? Well, lo and behold, just recently, right? I mean, think about it. They go silent for almost 18 months.
18 months, yeah.
They don't come back at us. They want to reopen the investigation after they renege, and that's when we sued them. So they renege and want to reopen the case, and we then initiated a suit. And just a few weeks ago, a federal judge basically said that the government is no different than you and I. You reach an agreement, you sign an agreement, you need to honor that agreement. And the way that the decision was rendered, it was pretty harsh to basically say they did everything that they were asked to do. They did everything you asked them to do, and now you're saying that's not good enough. Well, that's not fair. That's not the way you do business. So even though they would have a right to appeal and look at things, we think the way that the judge rendered the decision certainly speaks volumes about the quality of our efforts at the National Association of Realtors to protect consumers and to protect our members. So we're pretty proud of the way we approach that, and I worked real closely with Katie Johnson and also 2020 President Vince Malta. So the three of us really, we think we had an idea of what we were doing.
So you think the story is ending with this, or is there a part 2, part 3, or a sequel with DOJ? Because 18 months of silence, and then there is something. What's the next 18 months look like?
Hopefully they've got other industries to look at, and that they're pretty comfortable at this point that we do things for the consumer and that our decisions are made to protect property rights, home ownership, and fair housing. And if those are your tenants, then we feel pretty good that even if they do come back, that we'll do what we're supposed to do.
Right.
But we also are very strong in our belief that we do things the right way.
Right. Now, I just want to switch gears, Charlie, but I want to stay on the topic a little bit. What is your call to action for realtors who are kind of on the fence right now about everything that they're reading in the news and the media is spitting out about what's happening with the market and the market forecast that's out there? There are a lot of soothsayers and there's a lot of, and I don't want to get into all of the predictions out there, but as realtors, what's the call to action? What are your words of wisdom for the audience today?
Well, fortunately, I've been doing this, as you said, I have a long career. There are so many things that are different about this market than really what was, I think, the worst market from 2008/2009 through 2012,
which was
13,
was the banking driven,
which was banking and a housing recession at the same time. We don't have any of that right now. What we have really is a lack of inventories. We still have an oversupply of buyers, but we have homeowners and property owners that have stayed in their property a lot longer than when I first started in the business, where somebody would move every 3, 4, 5 years. Now it's 10 plus years. So you have a backlog of buyers and no inventory. Take it a step back to 2008, builders didn't build because they were going to compete against foreclosures and short sales. So builders went from 1.5 million new homes a year down about 750,000. They've never recovered. So now if you take a lack of 700,000 homes a year being built, multiply it by 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, and I'll leave it to the economists to decide what number to use. Well, that's anywhere from 5 million to 8 million homes that weren't built.
Right.
People stay in their homes longer. There's less inventory. And then you have a 3-year period of interest rates that were historically low, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. Yep. So if you bought a property and had that mortgage rate, or you refinanced, boy, to go out there now and pay 5 or 6%, right? Which first house I sold was 19.5%. So I see 5 and 6, and I'm still looking at opportunities as a business person. But those that have 2.5% mortgages and 3% mortgages look at their payment and say, I'm not moving.
Yeah.
Because it's going to cost me twice as much on the mortgage side, which is not true. It's not twice as much. It's a higher rate, but it's not twice as much. So they're not moving as quickly.
Right.
All that being said, I'm still bullish. I think that we're well positioned as an industry. I think people will start to decide where they want to live in the future. I think the biggest adjustment now is work from home. When you're in the office 2 days a week and you get to work from home 3 days a week, what property do you want to live in, renter or buy, that suits your needs for your family,
right,
or for you, your partner, anybody.
Right.
That's the biggest change. But I still see that there's a lot of inventory starting to come on in the spring. Our offices are busy. We still have huge rental markets, all the new construction's rental markets, and they're absorbed overnight. And people, I still believe, want to own property.
Right.
They want to build some generational wealth. So given the opportunity, I think we're going to be okay. And if we just have a little loosening up on inventory, I think you'll see numbers skyrocket.
Charlie, there is a big discussion about, especially in Manhattan, there is a big push against MLS and becoming a part of the Realtor Board.
Mm-hmm.
We've, as an association, tried to spearhead into the Manhattan market. We have been for years, and we're making some progress, but not where we want it to be. We've given some subsidies over the last 24 months. We've cut some dues. We've given some subsidies, scholarships to offices and brokerages. The pushback against MLS, what's your take on that? How is this going to get how can MLS help home ownership, and why is the pushback there, and what can we do?
It's interesting. The perception of MLS in our country is so different. And we do have certain areas that don't have the same strength in the MLS. Right. The state of Washington, state of Georgia, New York City. Those two states, you have a lot of non-realtor members that don't belong to the MLS because they think they can get the information. If you look at foreign countries that don't have MLSs, it's a free-for-all. During the Department of Justice discussion, I spoke to two senior executives from one of the big companies who said, when we were over in Germany once, we drove past the property and it had 7 real estate signs. So we stood outside the property and called all 7 companies that gave us different prices. 7 different prices and no exclusivity.
Yeah.
Tell me how that protects the consumer.
It doesn't. It
just doesn't.
Yeah.
So we know that system doesn't work. Then you go to some countries that don't have licenses. Mexico, Colombia, and there's many more that don't have real estate licenses, so they don't have any way really to protect the consumer either. So it really is a ever-evolving, ever-changing world economy. But now I come back to the United States. MLS promotes fair housing. It really gives equal access, hopefully, to all brokers that have a customer. And the way I look at New York City specifically, you have the Real Estate Board of New York, REBNY.
Mm-hmm.
They've been more of a lobbying and zoning stronghold in the city for so many years. Their previous CEO was somebody who was the most well-respected person. And more than anything else, he was able to help the city see zoning issues and how it would affect values, from block to block. But there's always been this inherent cooperation between many of the brokers. Mm-hmm. Some of the bigger brokers and even some of the smaller brokers where they would share information. That's really the baseline, if you will, of what an MLS does. But it would be such a change for those members in New York City. I'm a big believer in the MLS and the fact that you can get information to everybody that might have an interest in a property.
Right.
But I think the lobbying side of REBNY, along with the old way of doing things, is just eventually going to take time. And maybe it takes a horrific market for them to realize the value.
Yeah.
Where they need the broker from Queens that might have a customer from Manhattan.
Yes.
Or Brooklyn, because Brooklyn was too pricey, and they came back to Jersey or to the city.
Correct.
For it to work.
We've had a lot of people from the city, as in Manhattan, buying up in the outer boroughs.
Sure.
And even in the greater New York counties like Westchester, Rockland, Putnam. And we've seen a great, I don't want to use the word migration, but people were buying. The numbers were high. And they saw the need for an MLS. They see the relevance of an MLS and the practicality of having an MLS. And one of the things I always drove home with our agents is, they may be non-MLS agents, treat them nicely so that they know that we are an elite group that are professional in what we do. Don't talk down to them because they're not members of us, but engage them and invite them into our process.
And I'll take that a step further. If you don't treat the person the right way, who gets hurt? The consumer. not you, not me.
True.
The buyer and the seller are the ones that get hurt because
Absolutely.
the seller doesn't necessarily get the best offers and the buyer doesn't see every property. So if you and I have a disagreement and I tell my agents, don't show anything of Anthony's or don't show anything of Mike's or Mary's, who's being hurt?
The consumer.
The consumer.
Right.
And that's really where our fiduciary is on each and every transaction. And I think agents lose sight of that too often.
Right.
So you take that MLS, the relationship between brokers, and the access to all properties, and an MLS certainly works in the benefit of the consumer every time.
Right.
And we've just got to do better when it comes to that.
I had the opportunity to visit the NAR building in Washington and also the one in Chicago. And as a part of the Leadership Academy, I was very thrilled. It gave me a whole another perspective of what it is, because those who are sitting on the lines and say, okay, let me see where this goes. Truly a monumental organization, a phenomenal leadership out there. What's in store, Charlie, for 2023 and the rest of 2024? What do you see as issues or possible good things that are coming up?
So the first question is, did you take the train to D.C.?
I flew because I had a board meeting that day that I finished very late, and I took that red eye.
Yeah.
It's only an hour and a half, but I had to because I didn't have time.
Right.
Yeah.
I always like taking the train down to D.C. So many times I've actually been on the train with some of our legislators from the Northeast, and you can walk right from Union Station to the NAR building.
Right.
I think what the NAR building does is it signifies our commitment to everything we do on the lobbying and the advocacy side, because from the 12th floor, the outside pavilion looks right at the Capitol.
Exactly.
And we have a LEEDS approved building, right, a green approved building, so everybody knows where the National Association of Realtors is. And if somebody didn't know where I was from, the address is 500 New Jersey Avenue. So just want to let you know that they picked a really good spot. But I think what you're looking at going forward is an adjustment for a lot of agents who were super busy in 20 and 21, even with COVID, to less transactions nationally, and getting back to the basics. But I do think there will be enough business for those that have been successful. But you've got to do your prospecting. You've got to be knocking on doors and staying in touch with your sphere of influence and not taking anything for granted, because a neighbor can knock on a neighbor's door in a building or in a neighborhood and be the buyer. True. And we've always been the person who's been the trusted advisor. Well, right now there's desperation on a lot of buyers that they're actually doing the same prospecting that we are.
Right.
So we've got to get back to doing that. And I think business owners just have to be prudent in their operations to know that the agents aren't coming back to the office at the same velocity that they did in the past. We could have 40 or 50 people in an office in the course of a given day in the past, and now I might get 15.
True.
And they're not always there at the same time because there's still a fear of being in public places with lots of people.
I agree.
I think it's still going to exist for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. We have a cold calling and a prospecting mandate. There's a ban on it from the state. And some of the agents are really worried about it. At every legislative meeting, at every legal update, that's the question: when will they lift the ban? And I keep telling them that, if one door closes, another door must open. You have to find that door as to what works in your market. Not to be prescriptive about it, but the other states like Jersey, there's no ban. Connecticut, there's no ban. Pennsylvania, there's no ban. But New York State has an SOE. Until its SOE is over, we can't really do anything. And I just want to use this as a platform to tell all of our audience that you got to keep rolling with the punches. Find opportunities and ways. Don't just give up. Find alternate ways. But
and just to that point, Pennsylvania is probably a great example. During the pandemic, the state of Pennsylvania's legislature didn't see real estate as an essential business, even though the government did and allowed us to do business in just about every state in the country.
Right.
Pennsylvania was the last to come forward there, just like they were with the 1031. They took the position we were protecting people.
Right.
We were taking the position that our business is essential. we're going to take every precaution. We're going to wear masks and gloves and everything that took place in the latter part of 20. But people have to move. People had contracts. People had jobs. They had to leave the area. There were those that didn't want to live in a 95-story building in New York City that came to New Jersey for a 3-story walk-up, or went to one of the outer boroughs where they could walk and didn't have to take an elevator and be where they felt they were putting their health in danger. So, there's so many things that change on a day-to-day basis. But, again, when you work from the premise that you're doing what's right for the consumer and you have a fiduciary to your client, and a responsibility to do things the right way, then I think you can navigate through some of the the obstacles that exist in the business on a day-to-day basis.
Right. And you hit the note on the fiduciary, Charlie. I think that has to be the key. That has to be the cornerstone of what we do. The old car, never forgetting that, and I think that's our call to action. But before we wrap up, Charlie, 3 do's and don'ts, words of wisdom. What do you want to share?
3 do's and 3 don'ts. I don't look at things that way. What I do look at each day, and a good friend of mine, Kenny Parcell, who you know well,
yes,
always talks about doing 3 things a day. Do something hard, okay? Do something fun, and do something for somebody else. And I try to do that each day on a business level and also on a personal level, because there are just times that this business gets very, very intense, as you know.
Right.
So if you can do something that's fun, and I'll give you a great example. About 3 weeks ago, we have an agent in our Westfield office. And before the pandemic, she said that having a pie smashed in her face was on her bucket list. I kind of got taken back by that. And the manager, who's a real estate commissioner, said, I'll take care of it, but I just thought you might want to know if you want to come down and watch. Well, post-pandemic, not only did Bill Hanley, who's our manager, not smash the pie in Amber's face, he made me do it back in 19. She told everybody I reneged on a deal. Okay? There was never a deal, and I can promise you having a pie smashed in my face was never on my bucket list. Okay? But in January, I got a pie smashed in my face for a couple reasons. Number one, it was just fun for the office. We had 35, 40 people in the office that day. And, if it was something, and Amber's a great person, a great producer, a single mom who's really worked real hard, and that's, just another person that we protect in an industry, right? Single moms and underprivileged people. It made her day. It got, taped by everybody in the office, ends up on social media. Next thing you know, my phone's blowing up saying, well, I didn't know that you had that side to you. So, it's people look at you differently if you just become part of what happens every day. And, our company's been involved in so many charitable and philanthropic causes, and we're always going to do that because, A, you're part of the community, but B, it touches everybody's lives somehow, whether it's somebody with cancer and somebody with birth defects, March of Dimes,
right,
any of the local causes, education foundations. And we do that at the National Association of Realtors. We as brokers and agents volunteer more than twice any other industry, almost 75%. And,
100%.
And you in the Leadership Academy will have a capstone project that will talk about community service and what are you going to do for somebody else. So those are really my 3 do's. In terms of don'ts, it's real simple. Don't do the wrong things. Don't compromise your reputation over a commission. And don't think that this isn't the best business in the world, because to me, it's a great industry, it's people, and it's shelter. And as long as you treat everybody the same way, you'll be successful.
Great. Charlie, that was wonderful. I was so excited when you agreed to do this, and someone said, don't script him, let him go.
Yeah.
And thank you so much. This has been amazing, and I look forward to bringing you back. Excuse me. And I look forward to bringing you back one more time in August, with I would like to bring Kenny Purcell also on this show one day, and then maybe have both of you powwow, and I'll be on the audience.
Be careful what you ask for.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anthony.
Appreciate
A pleasure.
it. Thank you.
Great to see you.